Hello, everybody. I'm Dr. Marianne Pinkston, and this is The Better Life with Dr. Pinkston. And I'm so excited. I've got a fantastic guest today, and we're going to talk about, in my integrative world, a controversial subject, but I want you to have some good science and good information. We're going to talk about vaccines today. But the person that I have brought in is absolutely wonderful. I just learned a classic pianist. And so great, interesting person here. So Dr. Michael Myers Jr. is an MD. He's Harvard trained. Was formerly chief of, tell me if I'm wrong, chief of primary care and pediatrics at Summit Health in New Jersey. Worked some, I think, with through Boston Mass Journal, did some leadership positions there, worked with Blue Cross Blue Shield Massachusetts, a lecturer and author, and really on the lecture circuit, the author circuit and lecture circuit now with your new book that is coming out soon, The Vaccine Bible, which is wonderful. I think what we need today is some good sound science to disrupt kind of the bashing that's going on. I know there's every topic, there's good things, there's bad things, but the transparency and honesty and the science, I think, is what we need. And you're going to bring that. Yes. And I appreciate you for being on today. Thank you. Welcome.
Well, thank you for having me, Mary. Can I call you Marianne or Dr. Pinkston? Or
Marianne, please. Absolutely.
Marianne.
Please.
Okay. All right. Very good. All right, Marianne. Well, thanks for having me. It's great.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit. I've named, you had a laundry list as long as my leg of things that you have done and accomplished and now retired and enjoying your writing and piano and all the music. This is great. So tell us a little bit about you.
I'm very, very busy. So yeah, I pretty much since kindergarten, I've been at it, and I've been in the workplace since I was 14. I got my first job in Kansas City at Baskin-Robbins dipping ice cream. But I come from a family of doctors and dentists in the Midwest and in California and in Texas. And so in my family, if you're a smart kid and do well in math and science, you kind of become a physician or a dentist. So that's what I did. And I went to some of the best schools in the solar system. I went to Johns Hopkins for college and Harvard Medical School, and then stayed in the Boston area for my training in primary care and my career. I developed an early interest in the broader issues of healthcare, health policy, public health, and sort of changed my career in the early 90s. And then I went back to business school, got an MBA. And since that point, I've been in the space of healthcare consulting and working with Medicare, Medicaid programs, and then running medical groups. And my last position was for the largest medical group in the state of New Jersey. I came in as the chief of primary care and the chief of practice transformation. And my boss's boss at one point said, Mike, you're doing so well, we're going to give you another service line. So they gave me I'm not a pediatrician, but they gave me I said, well, I speak doctor fluently, even though I'm not a pediatrician. So I became chief of primary care and pediatrics. And I began that work really at a time when our pediatricians and primary care doctors and family physicians were really struggling with the messaging to parents around vaccines. And a lot of parents were, I would just say this, unduly concerned about the safety and effectiveness, and really came in with a whole laundry list of demands and options and asks for how their vaccines should be given to their children. And I understand that part, but that's what kind of provided me the catalyst for thinking about writing this book. The Vaccine Bible comes out in 3 weeks, July 28th, but you can pre-order it now. And we'll talk about that later.
Great. I will have that link on the website too, just FYI.
Great.
Good.
Excellent.
Well, great. So, knowing your background and how you come to this, the concern is real and the concern is valid. And I think the pandemic really turned everything upside down. So if you could kind of build in some of the positive science behind why we do vaccines, why do they exist? It's not for the pharmaceutical industry. It is there's true science behind it. So if you could comment on that, which would make the whole show.
So I will say that the idea of vaccination or immunization or inoculation began almost half a millennia ago, 500 years ago, right? So
Yes.
people had this idea that having a certain illness, and if you like took a scab or a piece of skin and inoculated a person, let's say against smallpox, that person could be prevented from getting smallpox.
Right.
And in fact, that was most clearly demonstrated when the United States was 20 years old. I know we just celebrated our 250th, but in 1796 in England, a doctor by the name of Edward Jenner demonstrated that there was a cause and effect relationship between people that received kind of a cowpox, scab, and preventing smallpox. At that time, smallpox was a dreaded, horrible, disfiguring, lethal illness.
Yes.
And so really the first air quote vaccination or immunization was for smallpox.
Right.
We didn't know anything about germs, infectious diseases, our immune systems. We just had kind of a very mechanistic view. So basically what vaccines are, they are a technology that we have developed as a species, humankind, to basically train our immune systems to develop antibodies and immune protecting cells in case you are exposed to that same germ in the future. So in a way, it gives your body an ability to dress rehearse and develop a kind of defensive army against germs that may be coming your way. So if you're exposed to the measles or the flu or the polio virus, you won't actually get that particular illness. And since 1796, what science has been able to do, and it's grown in a variety of ways, is understand infectious disease, germ theory, the immune system, and build all that in genetics and build all that into how vaccines are developed and to refine that. So that's what vaccines are. And what your audience should understand is that this is a very old technology that is safe and effective and protective.
Yes. And so I think there's kind of two things that my parents saw when I see, kids and my audience or whatnot bring to light is that there's so many preservatives or additives or giving so many of them at one time, especially to children that are so young. And that's two loaded questions, I realize. But those are the concerns I think that come up. And what I tell my parents, correct me if I'm wrong, and I may be completely, but because the technology is so old, to me, it's like almost a homeopathy of giving a little bit of something that just makes your own body then respond the way it's supposed to, maybe a little bit more strongly. But that is, when I use that term homeopathy, it may not be entirely correct, but that's a relatable thought. So please tell us about those concerns.
I think that's a very apt analogy, and you should keep using that if it's working with your patients and your parents. So let's separate those two things out. Okay, first of all, let's talk about the immune system itself. I would say next to the central nervous system, the immune system is probably the most important and most complex system that protects us and allows us as a species to continue to propagate and live and evolve. So our immune systems have this incredible ability to be exposed to millions and billions of germs and to fight those germs through developing antibodies and immune protective cells. Children are exposed to thousands of germs a day. And in fact, when children have healthy immune systems, the kind of antigens, that's the substance that's contained, that's the active substance inside a vaccine that is similar to the disease caused by that virus or bacteria, but will not cause that particular illness. These vaccines contain dozens, actually, to be honest, tremendous numbers of these antigens and be safely given. And your immune system has a clear ability to discriminate and to cultivate a specific, customized, memorable response to those antigens, so that if those real germs happen in the future. So your parents should understand that we give, let me just be, truth in advertising. In the United States, before a child is 6 and goes to kindergarten, they're going to be immunized probably against 16 different infectious diseases: measles, mumps, rubella, polio, diphtheria, pertussis, tetanus. I mean, there's a whole litany of these, and they're going to be given a series of shots, and many of those shots, like measles, mumps, rubella, diphtheria, tetanus, pertussis. Now the chickenpox vaccine has been added to the measles, mumps, rubella. They're going to be given this in terms of combination vaccines, so that, and those combination vaccines have been specifically formulated and tested in clinical trials to show that they're safe and effective as giving the individual components. The reason that's done is so we can actually get to the age of 6, protecting the child against all these germs, but do it in a way that doesn't expose them to hundreds and dozens of shots. So that's the main reason. So first, your parents should understand that the immune system is perfectly capable of responding to thousands of germs and antigens simultaneously, given to people. So your idea of homeopathy is a good one. Just a little tiny amount, and we get this tremendous result. In terms of additives and preservatives, only the things that are necessary to keep the vaccine viable and contaminant free. And let's be honest, we don't live in a germ-free world where we're not exposed to plastics or metals or other germs. But when it comes to vaccines, vaccines are the most highly regulated product in our country and probably other places, because they're given to healthy people, to a healthy population, and to children and older folks.
Right.
So the kind of exposures that people will be getting to preservatives or additives or metals, they're getting similar kinds of exposures just by living their lives, drinking water out of a plastic bottle, eating salmon out of the sea. I mean, there are a number of ways in which we're exposed to things. None of these are adequate health risks that people should be unduly concerned about.
Yeah, and so it's very, very tiny amounts, if any, at all.
Right.
And then,
minuscule.
But there is and this is a huge argument that probably would take us 3 or 4 shows to get through, but the autism risk. And so, the amount of vaccines or the preservatives or things like that, and the risk of autism, I think it's more pesticide based and food based and things like that. But can you speak to that?
Yeah. So let's put these two questions or concerns in 2 different categories. So let's talk about autism for a moment.
Okay.
Autism is a complicated neurodivergent degenerative illness that is still under intense scientific study and scrutiny. Yes. We do not, as a scientific community, have a clear causal reason for what causes the many developments. I am not an autism expert, but I do know that there is a range and there is a variation in the both the experience and the development of this illness over time. The causes of which could be genetic, environmental, nutritional. I mean, who knows? All of it is being basically worked through. This is not going to be something easily discerned. People want quick, easy answers to very complicated issues. And when it comes to autism, this is not quick, it is not easy, and it is complicated and hard. Absolutely. Now, unfortunately, in 1998, I'm not even going to mention this person's name, but there was a British physician who was later basically disbarred and his license removed and found to be under the payment of a law firm for a lawsuit that company, that lawsuit was trying to be filed against a pharmaceutical company, studied 12 cases alone, just 12, and made a leap in judgment linking the measles vaccine to the development of autism. This was subsequently shown to be erroneous, misleading, and false. The publication basically revoked the article. Later, the British government removed his license. Unfortunately, the damage had already been done, even though since that time, since 1998, there have been hundreds of studies among thousands of patients and people, mostly, I would say, in Scandinavian and Canada, that have shown a clear demonstration there is no connection, none, between the measles vaccine or measles as an illness and the development of autism from our current understanding of what autism is. So your audience should understand two things. Autism is a complicated, variable illness with probably many causes that's still being studied and defined. And measles vaccine does not cause autism. It just does not, period.
Perfect. And I describe to people that it's, autism is kind of the perfect storm. Again, epigenetic, genetic, environmental, tons of exposures that just come together in the perfect storm.
Right.
And if vaccines were to be an underlying cause of that, it is just a minuscule part of a perfect storm of underlying inflammation, immune system. I just can't make that perfect association.
I think something else, and it's not just for autism and measles vaccine, but even with the COVID vaccine, people need to keep a couple things in mind just from a philosophical or logical perspective. And you and I know this, I think, as scientists. Correlation is not causation. And let me explain what that means. Okay, we live in a world with billions of people, and we're animals, and so at some point we're going to develop illness and we're going to die. It's going to happen. Okay, that's just naturally going on in the background. If you superimpose upon that events like vaccination or anything else, and in a moment in time, this event or this incident happens at a time when a person develops something that may, naturally have happened anyway or whatever it is, people will begin to understand that this thing caused this thing. That's not the case. They're just in the same space-time continuum. It doesn't mean one thing caused the other. So correlation in time doesn't mean that it caused that thing. And that's something that people have to keep in mind, I think, when it comes to vaccines. We get lots of them now. They're being given all over the world to millions of people, but also other things are going on with that same population that have nothing to do with the vaccination experience.
Right. Exactly. Thank you. And so I know too that people we hear a lot of bad things that happen. And so when you watch the news, you go on social media and you will get inundated with, the stories and the spin of bad things that are happening. You never hear about the massive amounts of good things, that are happening. I think vaccines fall into that same, problem that, we hear about a few of the really bad, maybe side effects or problems or hospitalization, Guillain-Barré with flu or, and this, vaccine will get bashed, but you don't hear the vast amounts of lives that are saved. The chickenpox vaccine, for one, I remember a time before that hospitalizing many of my children for horrible infections and pneumonias.
Yes.
Shingles vaccine, the amount of pain, elderly that have committed suicide based on the intense pain.
Yes.
And the one, my favorite, is the Gardasil or the vaccine for
human papillomavirus, HPV.
Thank you. It's Monday morning, so my brain tends to, right? So the HPV, that's my favorite. And I'm so glad we started to vaccinate boys because there's a transmission there. It's not seen and unknown, and women are having, hysterectomies at 20 I'm exaggerating a bit, but these are things that, you don't hear the good side, right? Is there's just kind of a discrepancy and an imbalance.
I am so glad you brought up, and let's talk about those three disease states that you just mentioned: chickenpox, shingles, and Gardasil, in that order.
Yeah.
People tend, I had we're of a certain age, so I'm a baby boomer, so I'm way past 60. So
Yeah.
I came up back in the day when people had mumps and chickenpox and measles because there weren't vaccines then, right? And I did have chickenpox. I remember many of us, in fact, probably had this in your audience if we're of a certain age.
Yes.
And we survived it and we did well. And we think that our experience is normative of other people's experiences. Well, we were lucky. We were lucky because we had healthy immune systems and we had no complications. That's not the case for many people that get chickenpox, right? Particularly women that are pregnant or certain people that have compromised immune systems or older people or adults. Chickenpox to those folks can be deadly. And so the development of the chickenpox vaccine was very important to those populations. This is not just some kind of childhood rite of passage that's an inconvenience. It's a serious illness. So that's kind of one thing. To your point, shingles vaccine now is being shown to actually prevent dementia. This is, in fact, this is something to your point. People should be shouting from the rooftops about that. There is now emerging science that shows that people who have received the shingles vaccine are 20 to 30% less likely to develop Alzheimer's dementia in the future. And the thought is, it's still being, there's no controlled trial yet done. This is all observational studies and nursing home populations. But essentially, the effect that the vaccine has on the nerve cells, because the nerve cells that are harboring this dormant virus in the brain are developing that tau protein that's laid down and causes Alzheimer's and dementia. It's being shown to prevent that tau plaque development. It's going to be shown later. I mean, I'm speaking ahead of the double-blind studies haven't been done, but that's extremely good news. And to your point, if you survive shingles and it's a terrible disease and develop post-herpetic neuralgia, I mean, this is such a horrible chronic pain syndrome that some people actually do commit suicide and contemplate that terrible event to put them, it's like someone being on fire. I mean, it's that degree of pain. And lastly, it is great. There are two vaccines. We normally think of vaccines as preventing infection, but just like with shingles, we're now discovering that vaccines have other benefits. Not only does shingles prevent dementia, but some vaccines prevent cancer. And so the reason we give young girls and boys Gardasil to prevent human papilloma virus before they begin their sexual experiences in their lives is so that they won't get cervical cancer, throat cancer, other types of cancer caused by this virus. That's the same reason we give newborns hepatitis B vaccine, so they will not get chronic hepatitis B infection and then develop liver cancer years later. Again, a decision that was basically rescinded by this administration, I think to the detriment now of probably thousands of babies that are being born and likely getting hepatitis B infection and not knowing it, and will now basically develop in the future liver cancer. So vaccines are important technologies, not only to prevent illness, but to prevent dementia and cancer. And that's something that I think your audience needs to understand and remember.
With that, and I agree, my integrative audience, are very concerned about chronic, infections or reactivated infections like EBV, the old mono virus and whatnot. And I have been to so many conferences now, especially, from an autoimmune perspective and a chronic infection perspective, where we do see the underlying herpes viruses that cause the, shingles and chickenpox, but also, the herpetic infections that break out on your lip or genitally or whatnot, that they stay in the body and that they, can cause significant issues down the road, like dementia and whatnot. We are, we're fighting those chronic infections. And so to my integrative audience to be able to get the body to, fight those off and not store them and keep them. You see now the association of what you're trying to fight long term. And please understand there is an incredible amount of science beneath that, and it has been done. So it does speak to what we're trying to do integratively if people are strongly against the, vaccine protocols. It does speak to what we're trying to fight underneath.
Absolutely. Yeah. And your audience that cares deeply about integrative practice, right? Mm-hmm. So combining the best of both worlds, just let me also be clear about this. Yeah. And I believe that as well, right? I'm a person that models trying to stay in shape, have a good diet, to hydrate, get enough sleep, all that good stuff that we know we ought to be doing. I take my vitamins, all that stuff, right? But a couple things are going on right now, whether we're not, that are not in our control. First thing is our genetics. Whatever we've inherited from our parents and our grandparents and our great-grandparents, that's just the deck we've been dealt. We don't know, we can know, and we can know more and more about the genetics and the epigenetics of what we have inherited that may put us at risk for certain illnesses. And we can do certain things, like, for instance, Alzheimer's dementia is a very strong illness in my own family. So I've known about this for decades. I've made it a point to not smoke, not drink, to exercise, to play a musical instrument, to learn a foreign language, to stay in good shape, because all these things I got my shingles vaccine because I am trying to avoid getting Alzheimer's dementia to the point that I can. Okay. So, but even with all the good things that I do, I can't change my genetic inheritance. Right. The other thing that people should understand in your audience is that we are getting older. I mean, I'm almost 67. My grandfather lived to 102. So I may have 40 or 50 more years left, knock on wood. As we get older, no matter what we do, our immune system also ages. Just like our hair turns color, we get a little wrinkled and we get a little pudgy. Same thing's kind of happening. Our immune systems kind of get out of shape. That's where vaccines come in, and they're important for older people to protect us against influenza, COVID, respiratory syncytial virus, again, the shingles vaccine that basically deals with chickenpox virus that stays in our nerve cells forever. I mean, there are specific vaccines for older people that are safe and probably important to really take, so we don't end up dying from pneumonia or the flu. These are terrible illnesses that before the development of these vaccines killed these populations of older people.
Yes, absolutely. I agree. And so I think what you're saying is that it's a tool in the toolbox.
Absolutely.
Right. So there are many things we need to do for our aging bodies and our aging systems for prevention, because ultimately you want to live long, but you want to live well. Living long, right? And it is just a tool in the toolbox. So I think probably we'll touch on the C word and the pandemic and vaccine there. We'll take a very short break. I've got a fantastic little pharmaceutical company that sponsors me. And so Magna and Dr. Lesser will speak to that. But first, where can people find you and find your book, and which will be on the website?
The book is available right now on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or Bookshop. You can go to my website, www.drmikemyers.com, DRMIKEMYERS, drmikemyers.com, and find the book there. It drops in 3 weeks, tomorrow, July 28th, but you can pre-order it now. Nice. And give it to your friends and relatives as gifts. This is I call this the Fanny Farmer Cookbook of Vaccines. It's a basic book with basic information about every FDA-approved vaccine in the United States, covers 31 different infectious illnesses, and it is written for a general audience and even for people that are vaccine skeptic or just have lots of questions and may not really understand anything about how vaccines work or the immune system or the science behind them. So that's where it's available.
Very good. Thank you. And it will be on our website, drpbetterlife.com. I'll make sure everybody has a great link to go and rush and get this. And I'm excited about it. We will take a short break and be right back.
Depression, anxiety, low energy, weakness, these are just some symptoms of low B12 levels. And the absorbable B12 folate supplement that's helping people declare victory over depression symptoms is De Novo Plus B12 by Magna Pharmaceuticals. Patients with symptoms of depression often exhibit low levels of folate and vitamin B12. The human body needs sufficient folate intake to produce the essential neurotransmitters serotonin, dopamine, and norepinephrine. These neurotransmitters alleviate feelings of sadness, anxiety, and gloom. What makes De Novo Plus B12 so successful? De Novo Plus B12 contains readily absorbable folate and B12. That means it's more successful at correcting the root cause of your deficiency, not just the symptoms. Whether you are suffering with low energy, depression, fatigue, or anxiety, you owe it to yourself to learn more at magnaweb.com. That's magnaweb.com. Please let us know at checkout that you heard about De Novo Plus B12 on The Better Life with Dr. Pinkston.
Welcome back. I'm Dr. Marianne Pinkston, and this is The Better Life. We are talking with Dr. Michael Myers this morning, who has written the Vaccine Bible and has given some great information this morning, clarity on the science of why we have vaccines and why they are so helpful. Again, a tool in our toolbox for anti-aging and longevity, but there's been a lot of skepticism about the COVID vaccine. And so it's an mRNA vaccine. So what is the difference between, why is it, being singled out?
I think the two reasons why there's such skepticism about the COVID-19 vaccine was how quickly it was developed, and that there was a completely new technology called messenger RNA technology used to develop the vaccine. So let me speak to both of those issues. One thing I want to tell your audience, because I've been on a few podcasts promoting this book, and I learned about this from another podcast, but there's a movie now with Ryan Gosling called Project Hail Mary. And I recommend that movie for people in the audience. I saw it. It's a very good film. But basically, it's a film where the Earth as a planet and humankind is facing really an existential crisis of complete destruction. And so what happens, they have to actually solve the problem of how to travel at light speed. And they do that to solve this other problem, which I won't go into. But the point of the movie is that, and why it's applicable to COVID-19 vaccine development, is that when we cooperate and we collaborate, what this movie illustrates is that is a very powerful kind of activity that produces tremendous, even miraculous results. And that's exactly what happened. And that's what happened with COVID-19. So before the vaccines were developed for COVID, which happened in about 10 months, the shortest amount of time it took was about 6 years to develop a vaccine, from laboratory to actual public use. The reason why the vaccines were developed so quickly, first of all, the Project Hail Mary, in other words, we had literally millions of scientists all over the planet that were fixated on trying to figure out how to actually develop a vaccine that was safe for use. The other is that we had, as I said before, every vaccine has something called an antigen in it. Antigen is actually a word that means antibody generator, antigen. And the way that we develop antigens in the old days is that we would take like a little piece of the cell wall, or we would take, let's say, a poison that the bacteria exudes. That's like how tetanus vaccines develop. The reason tetanus causes lockjaw is that it exudes something called tetanus toxoid. And so we would weaken that and then use that because the body can kind of recognize that toxoid and then develop an antibody to it. Right. Messenger RNA basically is a way for us to chemically manufacture the antigen or the antibody generating portion of a virus and then have the body recognize that aspect and develop an appropriate immune response. And so what the COVID-19 vaccines were able to do using mRNA was to develop a response to something called the spike protein on the actual virus surface, which is how the virus would attach to a human cell. And when you knock that out, you don't get sick. So and then the other part of this is that we had these things called phones, and a tremendous spread of misinformation, no context, and actually used to divide people, to confuse them, and to engender fear. And I will also say, I don't think we had a very good public health leadership response to counter that, or to actually speak, to what was going on. So all these things were kind of coming together in COVID 6 years ago, which is why people were left skeptical. It was so bad, in fact, that the Surgeon General in July 2021 had to actually issue a health advisory, the kind of things that used to be done for cigarette smoking, about the harm of health misinformation coming out of the pandemic. So again, it was a new technology, but mRNA is now being safely used to develop cancer treatments and more vaccines. The reason why it was so quick is because millions of people around the world were focused on trying to find an answer, and they did, and the pandemic ended and billions of lives were saved. So again, we're still fairly new in the understanding of COVID and SARS-CoV-2 and the vaccine. We're only 6 years post the pandemic itself, but people should just be reassured that there was no conspiracy or weirdness, or this is the kind of thing you would expect from a society and a culture that's developed an advanced understanding of genetics and physics and biology and immunology, et cetera, that these kind of solutions could come forward. And that's exactly what happened with COVID-19 vaccines.
Yeah. There was so much fear, and the conspiracy, I think, is based on those fears, and it works both ways. The fear of the virus and the vaccine, and then the fear of government control and conspiracy and whatnot, and you throw those two together, and we go down the tubes very, very quickly. And I know there's a lot of great developing science that is out there that is not on the forefront, I guess. You mentioned it, like against cancers and whatnot. And I think because that fear still exists, so you don't hear all of the good science that is coming from that technology. May not have been perfect at the moment, but it did work. And so how do you speak to those that, physicians and scientists, whatnot, because in my integrative world, it is very solid anti-vaccine thought and teachings. And so how do you speak to that, the providers that are still adamantly against it?
I am going to ask people that are in that camp to take a leap of faith. And let me just say this, particularly in the United States of America, vaccines are the most highly regulated, and the kind of oversight and the kind of restrictions and study that pharmaceutical companies have to expend to develop a vaccine is extraordinary. So people should understand that you don't just roll out of bed and develop a vaccine and then it goes into market. These things take years to develop, millions of dollars, and are studied on thousands of people. They go through multiple clinical trials. And then before they are licensed, there are a series of tests and proofs that have to be clearly demonstrated before the vaccine is used on normal, healthy people. And even then, in the marketplace, they continue to be studied and to be examined. And if there are any major issues, and we have had examples, even with COVID, there was a particular vaccine that was being shown to cause a very serious kind of blood clotting, and that vaccine has now been removed from the market. There have been vaccines that were developed for rotavirus in children that were shown to basically cause a serious cause of intestinal blockage that was later removed from the market. So it's not that people that pharmaceutical companies and the government do everything perfectly right, But when they do issue a license and vaccines are being used, they are studied. So I just need people to, I hope, take a leap of faith to understand that in a country as big and diverse as ours, and with the kind of regulatory controls in place and the kind of scientific inquiry that goes on with vaccine development, all that means that we have a product that is, and again, we've been using these vaccines for hundreds of years. The measles vaccine first developed in 1963. We've been using this on billions of people for decades, safely and effectively, because getting a disease like measles or influenza could be lethal to your health, certainly debilitating. These are not illnesses that you want to get if you can avoid them. So that's kind of what it's a false equivalent to say that vaccines or natural disease are somehow equal. They're not. You don't, if you can avoid getting certain illnesses, you want to avoid getting those illnesses because the risk of complications and death. Yeah.
And I kind of, again, I always try to make analogies so that we stay aligned in our belief system. And by that, I mean, look at compounding pharmacies. Compounding pharmacies are so regulated more, I think, than your Walgreens and CVS and your your big pharmaceutical companies. I mean, pharmacies out there. But compounding pharmacies are quite frequently, thought to be, just creating products and just putting them out willy-nilly. Right. And people do not understand the amount. They get a colonoscopy without anesthesia on a weekly basis. These people are looked at and highly searched, and so they really have great controls. And I think that is the same for a lot of our drugs and vaccines that are out there. They really are looked at very closely.
I'm so glad you're speaking of that, because I think people take for granted. I'm not going to go into a whole history of the Food and Drug Administration, but we have government agencies in place because there was a history of poisonous substances ending up in cosmetics, in our food, and in our medicine that literally killed people. And this is why we have an FDA or a CDC, so that we as a public are protected. And so these substances are subjected to a lot of scrutiny and oversight. And people just need to kind of, again, maybe have faith a little bit. I know that we have a lot of bashing about a whole lot of institutions in the government and everything else. But the bottom line is that agencies like the FDA and the CDC have a history that is built upon protecting the public's health. That's their mission. That is their goal. And they need to understand that as we kind of go forward. Yeah.
There is a good and bad. I realize that there there is lobby. There are things underneath that do occur. But I think for the most part, the intent really is to protect. So I think, like anything in that leap of faith, you just have to sit in a place where you can look at both sides, right, and take and study it and take an understanding before you have a emotional reaction to something. I think we get a lot of confirmation bias sometimes if we believe something. Tend to believe more of what we read about it. That is, that confirms what we truly believe at that emotionally at that moment. So I think, as scientists, I'm a scientist, and I tend to think about it first and look at things and research and study, and then take the most, take the answer that is.
Marianne, you're speaking to people doing a risk assessment. It's very important. And that's why I wrote the book, because I want you to understand that there is a science and a background and a public health regulatory oversight around vaccines. You can have an opinion and you can have a feeling and you can have a discussion, but I think it needs to be based upon some information that's objectively verifiable, facts that you can get at and understand. And so the way the book is set up is to kind of give you a very basic understanding of some science and some biology, the immune system, public health controls, and then the story around these vaccines. And then you can individually go into, each of these things from anthrax to Zika, and you can read 4 or 5 pages, maybe as you're going out the door to see your pediatrician or family doctor, and then you can have a conversation and you can ask, you can even bring the book and ask some questions, about the things that I raise in those chapters. So that's what I think your audience ought to do. Do a risk assessment. Weigh this for yourself. I'm not telling you, dogma. I want you to understand and to open up and to question. That's the whole point of scientific inquiry.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I appreciate that very much because, what is good for one person may not be good for another.
Right.
You're right. That risk assessment and balance that, ask questions, and just please realize that the science is deeper than what if you're a wonderful worker out there, CPA or lawyer or whatever it is that you do, just realize that there are people designated to study this and that we do know more about the underlying science.
I hate to say that, but yes, it's true.
But you just have to respect that. But it's okay for you to have an opinion. Please make it a studied opinion. Do your research. Look at both sides and sit in the middle with it because it's very important. And so this is really wonderful. I looked up at the clock and I can't believe we're 45 minutes in. And so I really appreciate you so very much. What a delight you are. And I'm very excited for this book to come out, and I'm going to have it and put it on my shelf. I may mail it to you and have you autograph it for me.
I will autograph it. I'd love to do that, Marianne. That'd be great. Thank you so much.
I love that. So, and thank you so much. Are there any thoughts that we've left out that you are, something that you would like to address?
I would like your audience to just remember all is well. In fact, all is more than well. And I think that you can have confidence and faith in vaccines. And you know what? Ultimately, this is a conversation between you and your doctor, between you and your pediatrician, your family medicine, your nurse practitioner. Have that conversation and understand that person has your and your child's best interests at heart at all times.
Thank you. Yes, we are not, and you mentioned it before we got on, we are not paid by the pharmaceutical industry or the drug industry. I may have got a free lunch or two somewhere down the road, but I'm telling you, I'm not paid by the industry.
Pediatricians, primary care docs, family med, no, they are not well-paid people. They just are not. Okay, so let me just say that. There's no conspiracy. Right.
No, we are not influenced.
They want to help people. It sounds kind of, Pollyanna, but that's why they went to the profession. Yeah.
I'm fighting for it. And some know more than others. And that's why I love integrative medicine. And not to bash anybody else's education or whatnot, but we have a responsibility as practitioners to learn more and keep our minds open and
absolutely
and go
Stay
farther.
Curious. Right. Absolutely.
Again, thank you so much. Please join us again. We can have we can have many conversations out of this, but I appreciate it. And everybody go to drpbetterlife.com. I'm going to have a link to the book and everything that you can find out on Dr. Myers. I appreciate you so much. Is there, I know you had a website. Will you give that one more time?
Yes. www.drmikemyers, one word, DRMIKEMYERS.com, drmikemyers.com. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. And everybody, as usual, please take care of each other out there. We'll see you again next time.